Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. I made an announcement that there were going to be problems with the Wi-Fi, but so far we haven't had any problems with the Wi-Fi. So Hare Krishna, here we are, and welcome back. I'm a little late. We're talking to these lovely devotees that I'm getting so attached to. Anyway, so we'll go right into the recitation of Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, the prayer composed by Srila Sanatana Goswami, glorifying the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And it goes like this. Sarva Shashrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaita Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar, the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truth. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalidwan Luditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bandho Matsangin, Madguru Mad Mahadana, Mad Nistadaga Mad Bhagya, Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Sadhu sadhutadayin, adinit chochata kada, anamunchagada mam, premna rit kandayoskura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So long time ago, two demons appeared, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. They were brothers, twins. And Hiranyaksha, he was very, very, very powerful. And by his activities, and we're not exactly 100% clear what they were exactly, but somehow or other by manipulating or mishandling of the Lord, the Earth's resources, it fell out of orbit, the Earth, and it went into the Garbhodak Ocean. And Lord Vraha appeared. Today is the appearance of Lord Vraha. And because it was in a not clean place, the Lord took the form of a boar and went in with his, boar-like body and went in and picked up the Earth and saved the Earth, and then killed Hiranyaksha. So we offer our humble obeisances to him. Here we are on the Earth, and it's not in the Garbhodak Ocean, but it's pretty filthy. A lot of stuff going on in the world right now, all over the world. So we can pray for his mercy to help us lift it up and clean it, beginning with our own hearts. Okay. We're hearing this wonderful, wonderful pastime of Yadu, who has met this Avadhuta Brahmana, and the Brahmana is explaining to him how he learned to to be a Paramahansa Avadhuta just by observation of different aspects of the earth. We're on text 48. The various phases of one's material life, beginning with birth and culminating in death, are all properties of the body and do not affect the soul, just as the apparent waxing and waning of the moon does not affect the moon itself. Such changes are enforced by the imperceptible movements of time. Purport. The body undergoes 6 changes: birth, growth, maintenance, production of byproducts, dwindling, and death. Similarly, the moon appears to grow, diminish, and finally disappear. Since moonlight is a lunar reflection of sunlight, it is understood that the moon itself does not grow or diminish. Rather, we perceive the reflection of the moon in various phases. Similarly, the eternal soul is not born nor does it die, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 2:20. Najayate, mriyate, va kadachit. We perceive the reflection of the soul in the form of the gross material body and the subtle mind, which undergo various material changes. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the sun is a fiery planet and the moon is a watery planet. This is also confirmed by Srila Jiva Goswami and further illustrates the ignorance of modern science about the actual nature of the moon planet. Text 49. The flames of a fire appear and disappear at every moment, and yet this creation and destruction is not noticed by the ordinary observer. Similarly, the mighty waves of time flow constantly like the powerful currents of a river, and imperceptibly cause the birth, growth, and death of innumerable material bodies. And yet the soul, who is thus constantly forced to change his position, cannot perceive the actions of time. Purport. The Brahmana Abhadhuta instructing King Yadu again gives the example of fire, after having already proceeded to the example of the moon. This analytic method is called Singha Valokana, or the lion's glance, by which one simultaneously proceeds forward and casts backward glances to see if anything has been overlooked. Thus the sage proceeds with his analysis, but returns to the example of fire to illustrate the need for renunciation. The material body is certainly an ephemeral and phantasmagorical manifestation of the Lord's external potency. The flames of a fire constantly take birth and disappear, yet we perceive the fire as a continuous reality. Similarly, the soul is a continuous reality, although his material bodies appear and disappear constantly by the influence of time. It is said that the most astonishing thing is that no one thinks that they will die. Because the soul is eternal, the living entity is prone to accept any fleeting situation as permanent, forgetting that its eternal nature can be truly experienced only in the eternal atmosphere of the spiritual sky. If one is convinced of this fact, he develops the quality of vairagya, or detachment from material illusion. Text 50. Just as the sun evaporates large quantities of water by its potent rays, and later returns the water to the earth in the form of rain, similarly, a saintly person accepts all types of material objects with his material senses, and at the appropriate time, when the proper person has approached him to request them, he returns such material objects. Thus, both in accepting and giving up the objects of the senses, he is not entangled. Purport. A Krishna conscious person never feels proprietorship over the opulences entrusted to him by Lord Krishna for spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. The devotees of Lord Krishna should not merely accumulate material wealth, but should distribute the opulences of Lord Krishna in such a way that the Krishna consciousness movement spreads unlimitedly. This is a lesson to be learned from the sun. Text 51. Even when reflected in various objects, the sun is never divided, nor does it merge into its reflection. Only those with dull brains would consider the sun in this way. Similarly, although the soul is reflected through different material bodies, the soul remains undivided and non-material. Some problem?
Are you wearing the microphone?
No, of course not. Why should I wear a microphone? I'm rebellious. Oh, sorry. Could they hear something?
He said we can't hear very well.
Is this better? Hare Krishna. Sorry, I forgot to put the mic on. And my techie forgot to tell me to put my mic on. So I've gotten overly dependent. See, if you get overly dependent on the mercy of others, it reduces your vitality. Bhishma said, the Bhishma did. Okay, we'll do this translation again. Even when reflected in various objects, the sun is never divided, nor does it merge into its reflection. Only those with dull brains would consider the sun in this way. Similarly, although the soul is reflected through different material bodies, the soul remains undivided and non-material. Purport. The sun is reflected in many objects, such as windows, mirrors, shiny metal, oil, water, and so on. Yet the sun remains one and indivisible. Similarly, the eternal spirit soul within the body is reflected through the screen of the material body. Thus the soul appears to be old or young, fat or skinny, happy or sad. The soul may appear to be American, Russian, African, Hindu, or Christian. However, the eternal soul, in its natural position, is free of any material designation. The word stula mati bihi in this verse indicates those whose intelligence is gross and dull. We have practical experience of a dog urinating on a valuable painting at an outdoor art show. Due to its dull intelligence, the dog could not appreciate the actual value of the painting. Similarly, unless one takes to Krishna consciousness, one is grossly misusing the invaluable opportunity of human life. Human life is meant for self-realization, and we should not waste time bickering over material designations such as capitalist, communist, American, Russian, and so on. Instead, all people should take to the loving devotional service of God and realize their eternal, pure identity. One should understand the sun by observing its direct manifestation and not its distorted reflection on material objects. Similarly, one should consider every living being in terms of his pure spiritual identity, beyond the distorted manifestation of material designations. The word Atma in this verse also refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as we tend to observe ordinary jiva souls through the reflection of the material body. We tend to observe the personality of Godhead through the distorting screen of our material mind. Thus we imagine God to be impersonal or material or unknowable. When the sky is overcast, sunlight is the highest possible perception of the sun, which is covered by clouds. Similarly, When one's mind is fogged over with mental speculation, one may take the light emanating from the transcendental body of God to be the highest spiritual truth. However, when the mind is spotlessly clear, like a cloudless blue sky, one can see the actual form of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. The absolute truth cannot be perfectly understood by the covered mind of the conditioned soul. Rather, one must see the Lord through the clear blue sky of pure Krishna consciousness, which is free from fruitive desires and mental speculation. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Jivera Kalyana Sarana Kama Jagate Asi Mad E Madhura Nama Avidya Timida Tapana Rupe Rid Gagani Virahaje. The holy name of Lord Krishna descends into the darkness of the material world, just to benedict the conditioned souls. The holy name of Lord Krishna is just like the sun that rises in the clear sky of the heart of the devotees. Such brilliant knowledge cannot be understood by those who are trying, in the name of either piety or atheism, to exploit the material creation of the Lord. One must become a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, and then his knowledge will illuminate everything in all directions. Kasmin nu bhagavo bigyate sarvam idam bigyatum babhatiti. Mundaka Upanishad 1:3. Text 52. One should never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything. Otherwise, one will have to experience great suffering like the foolish pigeon. Purport. The Sanskrit prefix ati, or excessive, indicates affection or attachment in which there is no Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. The Lord is the eternal well-wisher of every living being. The Lord is so affectionate that he sits in the heart of every conditioned soul and accompanies him through his endless wandering in the kingdom of Maya, patiently waiting for the conditioned soul to come back home, back to Godhead. Thus the Lord makes all arrangements for the eternal happiness of every living entity. The best way for anyone to show compassion and affection for all living beings is to become a preacher on behalf of Lord Krishna and assist the Lord by reclaiming the fallen souls. If our affection or attachment for others is based on bodily sense gratification in the name of society, friendship, and love, that excessive, unwanted affection, ati sneha, will cause burning pain at the time of the breaking or destruction of the relationship. Now the story of the foolish pigeon will be narrated. A similar story is described in the 7th canto, 2nd chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, told by Yamaraj to the mourning widows of King Suyagya. Text 53. There once was a pigeon who lived in the forest along with his wife. He had built a nest within a tree and lived there for several years in her company. Text 54. The two pigeons were very much devoted to their household duties, their hearts being tied together by sentimental affection. They were each attracted by the other's glances, bodily features, and states of mind. Thus they completely bound each other in affection. Purport. The male and female pigeon were so attracted to each other that they could not tolerate even a moment's separation from one another. This is called Bhagavad Vismriti, or forgetfulness of the Supreme Lord and attachment to dead matter. The living entity has an eternal love for the Lord, but when perverted, that love is manifested as false material affection. A pale reflection of actual pleasure thus becomes the foundation of a false life based on forgetfulness of the absolute truth. Text 55. Naively trusting in the future, they carried out their acts of resting, sitting, walking, standing, conversing, playing, eating, and so forth, as a loving couple among the trees of the forest. Text 56. Whenever she desired anything, O king, the she-pigeon would flatteringly cajole her husband, and he would in turn gratify her by faithfully doing whatever she wanted, even with great personal difficulty. Thus, he could not control his senses in her association. Purport. The word tarpayanti indicates that the lady pigeon was quite expert in seducing her husband through smiling glances and loving talks. Thus, appealing to his noble sentiments, she efficiently engaged him as her faithful servant. The poor pigeon was ajitendriya, or one who cannot control his senses, and whose heart is easily melted by the beauty of a woman. The Brahmana Avadutta is giving valuable instructions by narrating this story of the two pigeons and the terrible distress they suffered by inevitable separation. If one's intelligence is not dedicated to serving Hrishikesha, the Supreme Lord of sense activity, undoubtedly one will plunge into the nations of bodily gratification. Then one becomes no better than a foolish pigeon. Text 57. Then the female pigeon experienced her first pregnancy. When the time arrived, the chaste lady delivered a number of eggs within the nest in the presence of her husband. Text 58. When the time was ripe, baby pigeons with tender limbs and feathers created by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord were born from those eggs. 59. The two pigeons became most affectionate to their children and took great pleasure in listening to their awkward chirping, which sounded very sweet to the parents. Thus, with love, they began to raise the little birds who were born of them. Text 60. The parent birds became very joyful by observing the soft wings of their children, their chirping, their loving innocent movements around the nest, and their attempts to jump up and fly. Seeing their children happy, the parents were also happy. Their hearts bound to each other by affection, the foolish birds, completely bewildered by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, continued to take care of the young offspring who had been born to them. Text 62. One day the two heads of the family went out to find food for the children. Being very anxious to feed their offspring properly, they wandered all over the forest for a long time. Text 63. At that time a certain hunter who happened to be wandering through the forest saw the young pigeons moving about near their nest. Spreading out his net, he captured them all. 64. The pigeon and his wife were always anxious for the maintenance of their children, and they were wandering in the forest for that purpose. Having obtained proper food, they now returned to their nests. 65. When the baby pigeon caught sight of her own children trapped within the hunter's net, when the lady pigeon caught sight of her own children trapped within the hunter's net, she was overwhelmed with anguish, and crying out, she rushed toward them as they cried out to her in return. The lady pigeon had always allowed herself to be bound by the ropes of intense material affection, and thus her mind was overwhelmed by anguish. Being in the grip of the illusory energy of the Lord, she completely forgot herself, and rushing forward to her helpless children, she was immediately bound in the hunter's net. 67. Seeing his own children, who were more dear to him than life itself, fatally bound in the hunter's net along with his dearmost wife, whom he considered equal in every way to himself, the poor male pigeon began to lament wretchedly. Text 68. The male pigeon said, "Alas, just see how I am now destroyed. I am obviously a great fool, for I did not properly execute pious activities. I could not satisfy myself, nor could I fully fulfill the purpose of life. My dear family which was the basis of my religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, is now hopelessly ruined. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word atriptasya indicates that the pigeon was not satisfied with the sense gratification he had achieved. Although he was completely attached to his wife, children, and nest, he could not sufficiently enjoy them, since there is ultimately no satisfaction in such things. Akritartasya indicates that his hopes and dreams for future expansion of his sense gratification were now also ruined. People commonly refer to their home sweet home as their nest, and money put aside for future sense gratification is called a nest egg. Therefore, all of the lovebirds in the material world should clearly note how their so-called wife, children, and fortune will all be dragged away in the hunter's net. In other words, death will finish everything. Text 69. My wife and I were in an ideal match. She always faithfully obeyed me and in fact accepted me as her worshipable deity. But now, seeing her children lost and her home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven with our saintly children. Text 70. Now I am a wretched person living in an empty home. My wife is dead, my children are dead. Why should I possibly want to live? My heart is so pained by separation from my family that life itself has become simply suffering. 71. As the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor children trapped in the net and on the verge of death, pathetically struggling to free themselves, his mind went blank, and thus he himself fell into the hunter's net. Text 72. The cruel hunter, having fulfilled his desire by capturing the head pigeon, his wife, and all of their children, set off for his own home. 73. In this way, one who is too attached to family life becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction. Busily engaged in maintaining his own family, the miserly person is fated to suffer greatly, along with all his family members. Text 74. The doors of liberation are opened wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to family like family life, like the foolish bird in this story, then he is to be considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 11th canto, 7th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna Instructs. Uddhava. All right, Uddhava ji ki jai. Haribol, Haribol. Chapter 8, the story of Pingala. Lord Krishna told Uddhava how the Avadhuta Brahmana explained to Maharaj Yadu the instructions he had received from 9 of his gurus, beginning with the python. The instruction of the Avadhuta Brahmana received from the python is that an intelligent person should cultivate a mentality of detachment and should maintain his body by accepting whatever comes of its own accord or is easily obtained. In this way, he should remain always engaged in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even if no food is available, the person who wants to engage fully in the Lord's worship should not beg. Rather, he should understand this to be the arrangement of providence, thinking, whatever enjoyment is destined for me will automatically come, and thus I should not uselessly waste the remaining duration of my life in worrying about such things. If he does not get any food, he should simply remain lying like the python and patiently fix his mind in meditation upon the Supreme Lord. The instruction the Avadhuta Brahmana received from the ocean is that the mind of the sage who is devoted to the personality of Godhead appears very clear and grave, just like the still ocean waters. The ocean does not overflow during the rainy season, when all the flooded rivers discharge their waters into it, nor does it dry up during the hot season, when the rivers fail to supply it. Similarly, the sage does not become elated when he achieves desirable things, nor does he become distressed in their absence. The instruction of the moth is that just as he becomes enticed by the fire and gives up his life, the fool who cannot control his senses becomes enchanted by the forms of women decorated with gold ornaments and fine clothing. Chasing after these embodiments of the divine illusory energy of the Lord, he loses his life untimely and falls down into the most horrible hell. There are two kinds of bees, the bumblebee and the honeybee. The instruction learned from the bumblebee is that a sage should collect only small amounts of food from many different households, and thus, day after day, practice the occupation of madhukari for maintaining his existence. A sage should also collect the essential truths from all scriptures, be they great or insignificant. The instruction received from the second insect, the honeybee, is that a mendicant sannyasi should not save the food he begs for the sake of having it later that night or the next day, because if he does so, then just like the greedy honeybee, he will be destroyed along with his hoard. From the elephant, the Avadhuta Brahmana received the following instructions. Male elephants are tricked by hunters into moving toward captive female elephants, whereupon they fall into the hunter's ditch and are captured. Similarly, the man who becomes attached to the form of woman falls down into the deep well of material life and is destroyed. The instruction received from the honey thief is that just as he steals the honey collected with great effort by the honeybee, a person in the renounced order of life has the privilege of enjoying before anyone else the food and other valuable things purchased by the hard-earned money of the householders. The instruction from the deer is that just as he becomes confused upon hearing the song of the hunter's flute, he loses his life, so also does any person who becomes attracted to mundane music and song uselessly waste his life. So does any person waste his life. Okay. The instruction learned from the fish is that because he comes under the sway of attachment to the sense of taste, he is caught on the baited fishhook and must die. Similarly, an unintelligent person who is victimized by his insatiable tongue will also end up losing his life. There was once a prostitute named Pingala in the city of Videha, and from her the Avadhuta learned another lesson. One day she dressed herself in very attractive clothing and ornaments and was waiting from sunset till midnight for a customer. She waited in great anticipation, but as the time passed, her mind became very uneasy. No man came to see her, and in disgust, she finally became renounced, giving up her hankering for the arrival of his suitor. Thereafter she engaged herself in thinking only of the Supreme Lord Hari, and her mind achieved the supreme platform of peace. The instruction received from her is that hopes for sense gratification are the root cause of all suffering. Therefore, only one who has given up such hankering can fix himself in meditation upon the personality of Godhead and achieve transcendental peace. Text 1. The saintly Brahmana said, O king, the embodied living entity automatically experiences unhappiness in heaven or hell. Similarly, happiness will also be experienced even without one seeking it. Therefore, a person of intelligent discrimination does not make any endeavor to obtain such material happiness. Purport. One should not uselessly waste his life pursuing material sense gratification, because a specific quantity of material happiness will automatically come to one as a result of one's past and present fruitive activities. This lesson is learned from the Ajagara, or python, who lies down and accepts for his maintenance whatever comes of its own accord. Remarkably, in both material heaven and hell, happiness and unhappiness come automatically due to our previous activities, although the proportions of happiness and unhappiness certainly vary. Either in heaven or in hell, one may eat, drink, sleep, and have sex life, but these activities, being based on the material body, are temporary and inconsequential. An intelligent person should see that even the best material situation is actually a punishment for previous unlawful activities executed outside the scope of loving devotional service to God. A conditioned soul undergoes great trouble to obtain a little happiness. After struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy, one may receive a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. After all, a pretty hat is no cure for a homely face. If one really wants to solve life's problems, one should live simply and reserve the major portion of one's life for loving service to Krishna. Even those who do not serve God receive a certain standard of maintenance from Him. Therefore, we can just imagine the security the Lord affords to those who dedicate their lives to His devotional service. Unrefined, fruitive workers foolishly worry about unrefined, fruitive workers foolishly worry only about the present life, whereas more pious karmis impudently make elaborate arrangements for future material sense gratification, unaware that all such enjoyment is temporary. The real solution, however, is to understand that by pleasing the personality of Godhead, who is the master of all senses and all desires, one can attain permanent happiness. Such knowledge easily solves the problems of life. Text 2. Following the example of the python, one should give up material endeavors and accept for one's maintenance food that comes of its own accord, whether such food be delicious or tasteless, ample or meager. Text 3. If at any time food does not come, then a saintly person should fast for many days without making endeavor. He should understand that by God's arrangement he must fast. Thus, following the example of the python, he should remain peaceful and patient. Purport. If by God's arrangement one is forced to suffer material hardship, then one should think, due to my past sinful activity, I am now being punished. In this way, God is mercifully making me humble. The word shayita means one should remain peaceful and patient without mental agitation. Dishtabuk means one must accept the personality of Godhead as the supreme controller and not foolishly give up one's faith due to material inconvenience. Tattenu kampam susamikshimano bunjana evatmakritam pipakam. Bhagavatam 10:14-8. A devotee of the Lord always accepts material hardship as the mercy of Lord Krishna. Thus he becomes eligible for supreme liberation. Text 4. A saintly person should remain peaceful and materially inactive, maintaining his body without much endeavor. Even though possessed of full sensual, mental, and physical strength, a saintly person should not become active for material gain, but rather should always remain alert to his actual self-interest. Purport. The word Vita Nidra in this verse is very significant. Nidra means sleep or ignorance, and Vita means freed from. In other words, a transcendentalist should always be awake to his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and should carefully cultivate Krishna consciousness. Being confident of his relationship with the Lord, he should not endeavor for his personal maintenance, knowing that the Lord is protecting him in all respects. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that the example of the python is given so that one will not uselessly waste his time in bodily maintenance. One should not think, however, that the purpose of life is to lie on the ground like a python or to make a show of starving the body. The example of the python should not encourage one to become completely inactive. One should rather become active in spiritual advancement and inactive in material sense gratification. If one becomes completely inactive, that is certainly nidra, or the darkness of ignorance, in which one remains asleep to his identity as an eternal servant of the personality of Godhead. A transcendentalist is eager to execute his service to the Lord, and therefore he is grateful when the Lord provides material facilities for such service. Mere renunciation of the material world is palgu vairagya, or an immature stage of spiritual understanding. One must come to the stage of yukta vairagya, engaging everything in the service of Lord Krishna. It is our practical experience that a devotee absorbed in spreading Krishna consciousness automatically receives all facilities for his personal maintenance. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Text 5. The saintly sage is happy and pleasing in his external behavior, whereas internally he is most grave and thoughtful. Because his knowledge is immeasurable and unlimited, he is never disturbed, and thus in all respects he is like the tranquil waters of the unfathomable and unsurpassable ocean. Purport. Even in the midst of great distress, a self-realized sage does not lose control of himself, nor is his spiritual knowledge lost. Thus he is akshobhya, or undisturbed. His mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the reservoir of unlimited spiritual bliss, and having linked his consciousness with the Supreme Consciousness, his knowledge cannot be measured. A pure devotee, having taken shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, possesses great spiritual power, and therefore he cannot be surpassed or overwhelmed. In fact, having developed his spiritual body, he is not affected by the deteriorating actions of time. Although outwardly he is friendly and pleasing to everyone, internally his mind is fixed in the absolute truth, and no one can understand his actual purpose or plan. Even the most intelligent human being cannot understand the mental activities of a self-realized devotee who has given up material life based on lust and greed and taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a great soul can be compared to the mighty ocean. Innumerable powerful rivers plunge into the ocean, but the ocean remains calm and peaceful. Thus a saintly person is understood to be like the ocean, pleasing, unfathomable, grave, unsurpassable, unlimited, and unshakable. During the rainy season, the swollen rivers rush into the ocean, and during the dry summer, the rivers, now shallow, severely reduce their supply of water. Yet the ocean does not swell up during the rainy season, nor does it dry up in the hot summer. In the same way, a saintly devotee who has accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the goal of his life sometimes will receive by providence great material opulence, and sometimes he will find himself materially destitute. However, such a devotee of the Lord does not rejoice in a flourishing condition, nor is he morose when poverty-stricken. Purport. A sincere devotee of the Lord is always eager to meet the Lord and render him transcendental service. He wants to remain fixed as an atom at the lotus feet of the Lord, because Lord Krishna or Narayana is the reservoir of all pleasure. He rejoices when experiencing pure Krishna consciousness and is morose when Krishna is not present in his mind. In his dealings with the material world, a devotee cannot be disturbed by ordinary materialistic people who sometimes insult him and accuse him of neglecting material sense gratification, just as the ocean cannot be disturbed by the innumerable rivers that enter into it. Sometimes lusty women approach a pure devotee, and sometimes speculative philosophers try to argue against the personality of Godhead. But with all such ordinary people, a pure devotee is detached and undisturbed in his blissful Krishna consciousness. Text 7, and we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. Who's going to start us off tonight? I saw Honest John's over there writing away, making notes. What you got for us over there, Dr. John?
We shouldn't waste time bickering over material designations. Instead, all people should take to loving devotional service of God and realize their pure identity. I like that one.
Okay, Hidetya Haribol. Thanks, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
And even in the midst of great distress, a self-realized sage does not lose control of himself.
Use the mic.
Even in the midst of great distress, a self-realized sage does not lose control of himself, nor is his spiritual knowledge lost. Maybe you could elaborate on, I can understand even in the midst of distress, a self-realized sage does not lose control of himself. And then, nor is his spiritual knowledge lost. How would you lose your spiritual knowledge in some moment of distress?
Well, it's like anything else. If you have an example, if a person is very absorbed in what he's doing, his attention is fixed. And then if something is going on around him, he doesn't become distracted. As a matter of fact, sometimes he won't even hear. Okay. If he's very absorbed in what he's doing, he won't hear. Somebody will say, "What about something else is going on?" And he doesn't become disturbed by it. So a person who's actually meditating on Krishna inside, it's hard to understand the activities of devotees, pure devotees, elevated devotees. Lord Chaitanya was the perfect example of that. Of course, he was the Supreme Lord. He was doing everything himself. After Sanatana Goswami contacted that bad water when he was going down to Puri and ended up with, itching sores all over his body. He was suffering like anything. And anyway, there was that whole pastime, and Lord Chaitanya talked him out of, committing suicide, and argued with Haridas Thakur, look at this person surrendered his body to me and now he wants to take it. It doesn't belong to him. Please talk some sense into this gentleman. But at the end, Sarup Damodar, he noticed, he said, Maharaj, he said, oh Lord, you were the one that caused him to get that thing. So you could test him in front of all of us and show us what a great soul he was, because he wasn't disturbed at all at any time. When it came time for him to give up that thought, of committing suicide, he just did it, because Lord Chaitanya didn't want it. Because his desire was actually to be with the Lord and to please the Lord. Even in his plan to commit suicide, he was thinking, I'll jump underneath the Jagannath cart just when Lord Chaitanya is dancing right there. And then I'll look at him dancing, and then So he was thinking always, of the Lord, even though he had this idea. So, like that, Lord Chaitanya is the supreme intelligent, the supreme absorbed in Krishna. And he's controlling it all. So, but we're just tiny, infinitesimal personalities, So our ability to be grave and all those things is completely dependent on him, whereas he's not dependent on anybody. So these thoughts and these abilities to meditate deeply and thoughtfully are the ornaments and opulences of a devotee. That's why, when the opulence is there and it's used to spread Krishna consciousness, he has it. He's not disturbed by it by becoming too attached to it. And if Krishna takes it away to test another, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Jai Maharaj, Hari Bol, Hari Krishna. Looks like he's going on his way over to give a class in the temple. I'm going to have to stop pretty soon. Anyway, that's what it is. I always say, if you just practice chanting Hare Krishna as much as possible, and I'm not saying, just like one of the verses, one of the things that I was meditating on was that it was talking like we shouldn't try to do anything, we shouldn't get. But then Prabhupada said, or the purport said, but then you don't just lay down like a python and expect, everything to come to you and not do anything for Krishna. That's not the idea. The idea is whatever position we're in, we take that as Krishna's mercy and engage in devotional service. And if we do that and become practiced at it and expert at it, then we won't become disturbed. And it doesn't mean just not to become disturbed when something's taken away. It's not to become disturbed when something very nice appears and it's given to you to use for Krishna. We have to use it in Krishna's service and stay fixed in meditation on him.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, as usual.
There was another good saying, and I'll leave it. After all, a pretty hat is no cure for a holy face. Can't hide behind that hat.
There you go. And what, they got the fashion industry and the cosmetic industry, huh? In all these industries. They're running away from themselves, isn't it? They're running away from themselves. Okay, I'm going to stop now, with the permission of everybody.
Tomorrow again.
Tomorrow?
Festival.
What time?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
6:30 the festival.
6:30. So we can start at 5?
On
On the website it's at 7.
7?
Yeah.
So then I think 5:30 will be good. And you meet 5:30?
Yeah, 5:30 is fine with me.
6:30.
You know me, I'm debilitated. Whatever happens, I just do the same thing anyway.
6:30. That's the
What is it?
The announcement says 6:30.
6:30. So we'll have it at 5?
Yeah, like last time.
Yeah, like last time. Okay, I have an announcement. We finished the Antya Leela today. Haribo! And I'll tell you, the last few verses of the 20th chapter and Lord Chaitanya's description of the Shikshastika, where he comments on it with different verses. There's hardly any purports, but he comments on, especially the last verse. It's just out of this world. And then Srila Prabhupada's concluding words about how he felt and about his spiritual master and why he did what he did and how grateful he felt to his disciples for helping him to publish these books is just enough to melt anyone's heart. Now we only have one chapter to re-record and then we're finished with the recording part. I'm hoping to get the Gita done before I leave. Possible. It's possible. And then when I come back, then Bhagavatam, straight through. All right. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi ki jai. The Avaduta Brahmana ki jai. The 24 gurus of all of us ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. We'll see you tomorrow we just decided, at 5 o'clock Central Time, right here in the live studios at Radha Lane. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow at 5 Central Time. Hari Bo.